Welcome to Internext Global On Demand. Please enjoy the session at your own pace. Hey Stan, super good to be here in Dallas and great seeing you in person. I'm super excited because today we're going to talk about sustainability. But let's start off with an introduction.
Yeah, I lead sustainability at O9. That involves two organization responsibilities. The first is I lead our own internal sustainable transformation efforts with the ambition to become a best-in-class sustainable software company. And on the other hand, I also lead our product initiatives to enable our clients in their sustainable transformation journey.
Excellent. Now, why are you excited about sustainability, Stan?
Well, I've always had a strong connection to the natural world, but in the last few years, I've come to believe that climate and sustainability are really the issues of our time. And I know that for some people that might seem like a naive statement, but I really do believe that the benefits of transitioning to a sustainable economy and dealing with climate issues has tremendous economic benefits and societal benefits in the long run. And I think that's what we should be focused on.
Now, Stan, outside of business, right? Any personal sustainability initiatives you've been working on? For instance, 4 years ago now I turned vegan, and one of the best decisions of my life. I love it. But anything you can share?
I would say that I'm like most people in that I try to recycle, avoid single-use plastics, avoid food waste, those types of things. But I've come to the realization that the biggest impact that I have on the planet is really embodied in the products that I purchase as a consumer. So, if you look at, any product off the shelf in the supermarket, it has an embodied a footprint of resources consumed and waste produced over its journey over the supply chain. And so I think that my own personal practice is that I need to be mindful of the products that I consume, the products that I purchase, and that's what I do.
Awesome. No, thanks for sharing that. Now, turning actually to business, let's talk about a sustainable supply chain. What is that?
That's a very good question. It's a great first question. I think that in the supply chain profession, there's been a focus on the link between sustainability and achieving operational efficiencies, like material utilization, production, transportation, those types of things. And I think those are foundational to reducing waste and improving profitability in the context of supply chain. But the problem space for sustainability goes way beyond that. For instance, if we're going to tackle the effects of climate change, which I think is arguably a very big issue for us as a civilization, we're going to need to transition to low carbon energy sources across the supply chain. I think that's foundational. From a product perspective, we're going to need to focus on designing products that are composed of non-toxic and sustainably produced raw materials. And those products need to be designed in such a way that next to nothing goes to landfill at the end.
Stan, what I would be interested in is how would digital technologies enable the transition to the sustainable supply chain that you just described?
Yeah, so if you look at the regulations that are formulating in Europe particularly, but also in the US, kind of the foundational element is broad-based corporate level reporting of an array of sustainability metrics and KPIs. And digital technologies are certainly foundational to that. But if you kind of examine the regulations in more detail, they indicate that companies are going to have to kind of reach beyond their organizational boundaries and begin acquiring primary measurement data from their suppliers and service providers. So digital technology is going to be essential to sharing information, to acquiring the information, validating it, harmonizing it, and that type of thing. That's foundational. I think that there's other tools that are at play now that have tremendous capability, opening up new use cases. AI, machine learning are kind of the obvious examples. So if you look at kind of probing the depths of the supply chain to identify risks that may exist there, things like child labor and conflict materials and other things like that. AI can be employed to essentially scan the web, the vast information flow on the web, and identify potential risks. And then we can link that data to your supply chain to identify where those risks really apply to you. And I think that digital technology and these kinds of tools are essentially fundamental to that. In fact, Accenture recently published a survey that basically concluded, if you will, that achieving sustainability objectives is virtually impossible without digital technology. They surveyed something like 560 different companies, over $1 billion in revenue, and virtually every one of them said that, or emphasized the idea that digital technology would be essential to the mission of sustainable transformation.
Thanks for sharing that. Very insightful. Now, Stan, O9's digital brain, right, has become an industry-leading platform for supply chain planning. How can that serve as a foundation for sustainable supply chain?
Many of our clients are dealing with the question of how to kind of move from compliance level reporting to actually taking strategic and operational actions to drive their supply chain toward more of a sustainable operating model. And the question of how to do that is rooted in basically being able to operationalize the targets and the goals that you've set for yourself. That capability is something that we believe is inherent in the tools that you use presently to optimize the performance of your supply chain as an ideal platform for essentially driving the supply chain to more sustainable performance, and including in balance with cost and service level objectives. So to that end, we've extended, in anticipation of those needs of our clients, we've extended our core modeling capabilities, our analytics frameworks, and scenario analysis, those types of things, to incorporate those KPIs, those metrics that would enable you to balance the trade-offs between conventional supply chain metrics and sustainability objectives.
Very interesting. Now, Stan, the two of us have been, talking with a lot of companies, and always comes down to, a couple of objections or concerns, right? And one of them is data, especially related to scope 3.
Right.
How do we solve the data problem?
Yeah, that is a very good question, and I think there's a little bit of background that would be helpful in kind of setting the stage for answering that question. The Sustainability Institute did a report in 2021 that essentially found that 80% of large corporations globally are already doing some level of sustainability reporting, but that reporting is focused on the sustainability performance within the operational boundaries of the organization. And McKinsey and other companies that do extensive studies of the supply chain have basically shown that 80% or more of your environmental footprint as an organization actually exists outside of your organizational boundaries. From an emissions standpoint, this is called Scope 3 emissions, according to the GHG protocol. And if you look at, there was a World Resources Institute report that basically said of the reporting companies, only about 25% of them report on these Scope 3 value chain level attributes. And the important aspect of just that 25% is that most of those calculations are estimates that are based on analysis of procurement spend rather than actual primary data. So the significance is, if you look at the regulations that are coming down the line in Europe, they are moving from allowing for estimates of that nature to actually requiring a certain amount of what's called primary or actual measured data from your suppliers and your service providers. Well, what does that imply? that implies you're going to need to be able to acquire and cleanse and harmonize that data from a vast array of sources outside of your organizational boundary. So how do you do that where you're going to need to engage in a level of transparency and collaboration that really up to this time has not existed?
Absolutely. And Stan, what I'm excited about is that obviously we as O9 have a lot of partnerships with companies that provide data, and ultimately we can bring that all together.
Yeah.
Now, when we engage with those companies, right, they have some type of ESG reporting in place. We're trying to set it up. But I'm interested in, Stan, what are the use cases after that, right? We've been talking about, for instance, products, carbon footprint planning, or how can we then leverage the data in demand, supply, IBP type of decisions we're trying to make every day, week, month, quarter, and so forth?
On the product side, the idea of eco-design of products, circularity, basically the ability to recover and reuse most of the materials of the products, as well as product footprinting, just understanding what the environmental impact is of the products. These are central themes in sustainability. And so we are working to streamline the product footprinting process. Typically, it's a fairly tedious process for most companies, working to streamline that. And using our modeling framework, we're also working with companies to essentially improve the primary data or actual measured content within the product footprint. Our planning and scheduling capabilities also have the ability to essentially project the environmental footprint of new product designs. Assuming certain demand for the product, you can project that out, look at different product mixes, and understand how those projections compare to the targets that you're setting for your business, for your products, your product lines. Another area where we have customers that are using our product, and from a scheduling and planning standpoint, is the back end of circularity, essentially scheduling the use of scrap materials and post-consumer materials back into the production process. This has a significant cost reduction, but it also has very measurable carbon impact, environmental impact capability. From the standpoint of transparency, supply chain transparency, this is a big issue for many industries. The ability to be able to understand and detect if there's risk within your supply chain, it may be human rights violations, things like forced labor, unfair labor practices and working conditions, those type of things. There's also economic risk, deforestation, those types of things. And many industries are subject to regulations and laws to be able to identify those types of things. That implies a need for visibility. And one of our strengths as a company is we have an amazing, essentially, supply chain modeling capability, what we call the enterprise knowledge graph. And we're able to create multi-tier visibility and then embody that supply chain, that digital twin, with essentially risk indicators. We are working in the area of acquiring data from third-party providers that use AI-based tools that we've described previously, as well as working on essentially frameworks for exchange of information, those types of things, using international standards. And that provides for the ability to get a much greater understanding what your supply chain looks like beyond the tier one relationships. Most companies only understand what the tier one is going to look like. And really the regulations are requiring companies to probe far beyond the tier one into the farthest reaches of their value chain. And that's where a lot of the problems lie, is in the areas of material extraction and processing all the way upstream. So gaining that visibility, it takes time, but you need the digital foundation in order to do that. I think one of the things that we're most excited about as a company is fully integrating all these metrics at the site level emissions data for our suppliers, product level impact data into the forward planning processes. So O9 is known for its planning capabilities, integrated planning capabilities. We're developing new use cases around sustainability for acquiring the data, managing environmental and emissions and those types of things, other sustainability metrics from an ESG standpoint within the supplier base to be able to do sustainable sourcing and those types of things. But the basic idea is, this is a very powerful concept because a lot of companies are setting targets like 50% emissions reduction by 2030. Well, how are you going to accomplish that, right? And so the idea is that you need to be able to operationalize that in some way. So how do you take a plan of 2030 or 2035 and basically break it down in a strategic and operational horizon, and then essentially disaggregate it across your business to the point where you can look at targets by region within your business, targets by site, targets by line of business, targets by product. And then once you've set those, then your operational planning capabilities when you're doing supply demand planning, across those structures that you've created, you're able to project the balance of supply and demand across the targets that you've established for your business. And that allows you to actually, on a daily planning cycle, weekly planning cycle, actively drive your supply chain towards a sustainable operating model over time. So if you look at where the industry is today, people are pretty much focused on essentially a forensic task of accounting what happened last year.
Yeah.
And I think where the real value is going to occur and where the real value that a supply chain platform, planning, decision intelligence platform is how to operationalize that across your business as you've defined it and drive the supply chain towards a sustainable operating model. And I think that is an area that's very exciting. I think that we're ahead of the curve. I think that eventually the industry is going to catch on to that because as we talk to our customers get it, right? And they're very excited about getting to that point. And so I think that it's intuitive, and I think that ultimately the market is going to kind of reach the same conclusion and drive towards that type of framework.
But and first and foremost, super interesting. But yet, a lot of companies that we talk to are excited, right? They want to do something, but yet budgets do not get allocated yet. Should we be concerned about, greenwashing, or what's your personal point of view here?
I think I'll take the second question first because it's an interesting question. Greenwashing, right? I think a certain amount of greenwashing still exists. I think it's very clear. But I think that the time for greenwashing is coming to an end. Right? So how can I say that? Well, if you there's another study that was done by the UN Global Compact and Accenture that looked at the CEOs that interviewed CEOs, and 93% of CEOs interviewed said that they viewed their responsibility as driving their businesses towards sustainability. So there's clearly a stakeholder expectation of responsibility and accountability at that level, right? And so if you look at some other notable events recently in recent years where CEOs have been asked to step down by their boards, largely over greenwashing allegations. That's actually happened. So this sends a very, very clear message, I think, to leaders, corporate leaders, that the risk of greenwashing is really not worth it, right? It's not just a brand risk issue now. It's a personal credibility and professional reputational risk for leaders. So I think that we're going to see a decrease in that. Why is there no budget? If you believe that's true, then you should also see a follow-on of budget in that area. And I think there's probably many reasons for that, but I think that one of the main ones is I think there's still a lack of clarity on what the roadmap is for for sustainable transformation. And
But on that one, Stan, and I think that's what I'm so excited about is sort of how you laid it out, right, and how we can actually help with that. Now, Stan, unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I want to thank you for spending time with me here in Dallas. And Stan, the good news is, companies can get in touch with you. Likely after this event, you will be very busy. But thanks again for spending time with us, and to the audience. Hopefully, this was super insightful to you as well. We're excited about it, and get in touch with us to learn more about our sustainability offering. Thanks, everyone.